It's 3 a.m. You're awake again. Not from a nightmare. Not from noise. You just opened your eyes, and now you're staring at the ceiling. Your phone says 3:07. Part of you wants to check it. Another part wants to feel ashamed for being awake at all. You assume your body is broken, but the real answer is far stranger than a broken body. For most of human history, waking up in the middle of the night wasn't a malfunction. It was the plan. Picture your life 200 years ago, before electric light split the dark into one solid, unbroken block. You'd lie down not long after sunset, you'd drift off within the hour. And then, somewhere around midnight, you'd open your eyes again. Wide awake, calm, not anxious. This wasn't insomnia. This was simply the middle of the night. The historian Roger Ekirch spent over a decade combing through diaries, court records, and medical texts from pre-industrial Europe. What he found surprised even him. Hundreds of documents referred to something called first sleep and second sleep, two distinct stretches of rest separated by an hour or two of quiet wakefulness in between. People prayed during that gap. They talked with a spouse. They tended a dying fire. Some even visited neighbors in the dark. Waking at midnight wasn't a problem to solve. It was simply part of the night. So when did one long, unbroken stretch of sleep become the only acceptable kind? The candle did it first, then gaslighting. Then, by the late 1800s, the electric bulb finished the job. Suddenly, night stopped being dark. Suddenly, the boundary between day and night blurred into something a person could control with a switch. Sleep stopped being a landscape with two halves and became a single block you were expected to power through without interruption. If you woke up in the middle of it now, something felt wrong. Not because your body had changed, because the world around it had. Here's where the story gets stranger. In 2015, the sleep researcher Jerome Siegel and his team at UCLA didn't just read old diaries. They traveled to 3 pre-industrial societies still living without electric light: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Simane of Bolivia. They strapped sleep tracking devices onto real people, in real huts, under real night skies, and recorded what actually happened when no clock and no bulb told anyone when to rest. What they found complicated the first sleep, second sleep story even further. These communities didn't split their night into 2 neat halves either. Instead, they slept in one continuous stretch, but a shorter one than most people assume they need, somewhere around 6.5 hours, often beginning well after sunset rather than right at dusk. They stayed up around the fire first. They talked. They didn't anxiously chase a fixed 8 hours the way you might, and almost none of them reported anything resembling insomnia. The concept barely seemed to register in conversation at all. So, which is true? Segmented sleep, the way Ekirch found in old Europe? Or one continuous stretch, the way Siegel found among the Hadza and the San? The honest answer might be both, depending on the season, the available light, the temperature, even the threat level outside the shelter. Your ancestors weren't following one universal rule passed down like scripture. They were responding, night by night, to whatever their environment demanded. Sleep wasn't fixed. It was adaptive. That single idea changes everything about how you should think about your own eyes-open moment at 3 a.m. Your body isn't malfunctioning when it wakes early. It's running code that's far older than streetlights, far older than alarm clocks, far older than the phrase a good night's sleep. The anthropologist Carol Worthman, who has spent decades studying sleep across cultures at Emory University, has argued that what counts as normal sleep is shaped enormously by environment, by social structure, by how safe a place feels once the sun goes down. In small hunter-gatherer groups, someone was usually half awake at any given hour, listening into the dark, watching for movement near the fire's edge. Fragmented vigilance wasn't a flaw in the system, it was the system. Think about what that actually means. You are descended from people who survived in part because some of them woke up at strange hours for no obvious reason. The lighter sleepers, the ones who stirred at a snapped twig outside the shelter, the ones whose eyes opened at 2 a.m., and who, just maybe, heard something the rest of the group missed. Across tens of thousands of generations, that trait didn't get bred out of the species. If anything, it got reinforced. Every time you wake up without explanation, you're not broken. You're running one of the oldest watch shift programs your species ever wrote into its own biology. Now hold that idea next to how you actually treat the moment it happens. You check the time. You feel a small jolt of dread. You calculate how many hours remain before the alarm, as if sleep were alone accumulating interest. You reach for your phone, and the light from the screen tells your brain it might be daytime. And now you've stacked a brand new modern problem directly on top of an ancient, perfectly ordinary event. Your ancestors didn't reach for anything that lied to their nervous system about the hour. They lay in the dark or sat near a dying fire and let the wakefulness simply pass through them like weather. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The thing keeping you from drifting back to sleep at 3 a.m. probably isn't the waking itself. It's the meaning you've attached to it. Somewhere in the last century and a half, you inherited the belief that one continuous, unbroken block of sleep is the only correct kind, and that any deviation from it is a medical event requiring anxiety, late-night searching, and quiet self-diagnosis. But your nervous system inherited something older and far less judgmental, a pattern that simply says, waking in the dark is part of being a mammal that survived its nights by staying just a little bit alert. So what would your ancestors have actually done, lying there at 3 a.m. with eyes open and mind quiet? Probably nothing dramatic. They might have shifted position, listened to the house or the camp, settled around them, thought about the next day's work without urgency, because urgency wasn't especially useful at that hour. Maybe they spoke a few words to whoever else happened to be awake nearby. Then, eventually, sleep returned on its own, the way water slowly fills a hollow in the sand. There was no scrolling. There was no glowing rectangle insisting it was somehow still daytime. There was only the dark, the quiet, and a kind of patience that let the second half of the night arrive whenever it was ready. That patience is the peace modern life seems to have stripped out almost entirely. You live inside a world engineered to convince you that wakefulness at night is an emergency. Every notification, every glowing clock face, every app quietly insisting that rest is something you either win or fail at, pushes you further from the calm your ancestors felt as a simple matter of course. They didn't have a fixed 8-hour target to hit. They had whatever sleep the dark allowed, broken into whatever shape the season required of them, and for the most part, they trusted it without a second thought. Maybe that's the real twist hiding underneath all of this. The thing you've been quietly calling a sleep problem might actually be a meaning problem instead. Your body is doing something extraordinarily old, something that helped earlier generations of humans survive through tens of thousands of dangerous, unlit nights. The biology hasn't changed nearly as much as the story wrapped around it. Researchers like Worthman point out that anxiety about sleep itself, the dread of being awake when you think you shouldn't be, often does more damage to actual rest than the waking ever did in the first place. It isn't the open eyes at 3 a.m. that exhausts you, it's the argument you have with yourself about what those open eyes mean. So tonight, when it happens again, when you blink awake at some unreasonable hour with no nightmare and no noise to blame, try something different. Don't reach for the phone. Don't run the math on how many hours are left. Just lie there, the way countless generations of humans have lain there before you, and let the dark be ordinary again. Because the version of you that feels broken at 3 a.m. isn't broken at all. You're simply awake, the way your species has always occasionally been awake in the dark, quietly waiting, the way it always has, for sleep to come back around on its own.